Okay. So thank you, Donna. Let's hear from Jessica.
Hola, my name is Jessica Perez. I am the Director of Educational Development at the Birdhouse, but I am in Maywood. This is the home of the Tongva Gabrielino. But my fascination with plants has been with me as a child. I worked actually in Parks and Recreation for most of my life as a civil servant. And I feel that those were the spaces that were my first teachers, that really had the trees and the animals and everybody that really kind of helped raise me as a kid. So I think I came in this way. So that's just how I am. But that's my fascination with the plant world. I will hand it over to Christine.
Christine, you're muted there.
I'm Christine, and I have like over 25 trees that I've become the caretaker of here. I live in Eagle Rock. I bought this property in 2002, and I've learned a lot about trees. I was a sort of a hobby gardener, but now I have to really dig in and find out all about my trees and my plants and amend my soil and do all of that. And I am interested in who was here before I am. So I know the realtor and the developer of the property, but who was here before. So, you know, I'm really a big proponent of leaving our bear in Eagle Rock alone. And I've had bobcats come by, and I leave water for the plant, for the animals, mainly because I like to keep my sprinkling system intact. So I give them water in bowls. That seems to work. They leave my stuff alone. And everything seems to be working fine. I just want to know more. Okay, do I pick someone now?
You do.
James, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is James. I come to this a little bit. I mean, I'm pretty novice with regard to plants. Not totally inexperienced. I grew up like, you know, like my father's really good friend from high school was a farmer. You know, so I grew up often being on that farm, doing the work that they didn't want to do, which was a lot of fun for us when we were young. But no, I come into this space a little bit more through like within the context of a political understanding and or awareness. I have a family by marriage that is Lakota. They're Hunkpapa, some family in South Dakota, North Dakota. They're related, for instance, to like Vine Gloria. And I'm very active in Los Angeles. Was one of the founding members of the Los Angeles Tenants Union. And so, I mean, my interest in this space has to do with like, I mean, of course, I want to recognize those that came before, but I want to recognize that those that came before that had stuff taken from them, that like that same process continues. And so yeah. I want to learn more about the history because it's here in the present, so that I can make informed choices and do right by those before me and those after me. Maybe I'll popcorn to Paige.
Hello, I'm Paige, and I am a food person. I am a cook and a personal chef, and the bird people have graciously taken me into their hearts, and I've got to spend a lot of time at the birdhouse with Cameron. And now I have my own little garden in the back, and I'm dealing with all the fun things of my broccoli being eaten and my peas not growing quite right, and just kind of the all the things, all the initiations of like actually growing your own food. And I was birthed on this land, from this land, and so therefore I'd like to learn everything I can about this land, and obviously who the original stewards were, and how they cared for the land in order to figure out how we can feed people now. Thank you.
Who would you like to get to know, Paige?
Devo.
Hi there, everyone. Wow, I'm like almost overwhelmed with the emotional impact. Sorry, it's just so powerful to have such a loving community with people who are committed. And yes, we are flawed. And yes, we fucked up, but we want to fuck up. You know what I mean? We want to make this a better place for everyone. And it's so nice to be in a shared spirit that way. I grew up in Hollywood, California. My first word was bird. I grew plants and seeds and experimented with my own canals as a young child. And at Cal Arts, I studied indigenous people's art. I became fascinated. I went to a powwow when I was 9 and was so moved and, by the experience. And so I've always felt a connection to nature and plants. And my first vision quest, when I was in a teepee, I died. My bones were carried to the top of a lupine tree. I was given a message. I've had visions my whole life as an artist and a painter, and used dreams certainly as a way to inform my future. My husband, in fact, who died a year and a half ago, he, had a dating site in heaven, swiping left. Oh, this guy'd be good for you. So it's kind of funny. But my own relationship to plants, I don't practice as a medical intuitive, but I do get visions when I'm with people who are ill. I see into their bodies. I've had like a vision of a plant that wasn't in my backyard that grew overnight to help heal me when I had cancer, and it was curly dock that grows only in Northern California. So that was, so my whole life is sort of sidebar life is being able to be conscious of alternate dimensions that are present and be able to bring them forth and call them forth for our healing. And plants, the magical nature of plants are our guides and our teachers. And the more that we can surrender to our purpose serving them versus their purpose serving us, and understand what we're here to learn through them and through nature, is just very powerful. So I feel blessed to have stumbled upon this class. And I've been writing a novel for over 21 years or more, which is set in Santa Fe, but about a group of kids, all who have special empathy. One of them is they had a shaman leader, and they go on a vision quest together, a shared kind of hallucination to solve a murder. So I'm committed to bringing whatever information I have in this to empower that young adult novel, which is, I'm a filmmaker. It's been financed as a film, and I'm just really so excited to just be here to make music with you, and dreams and everything else that we can. And Lazaro, thank you. And Cameron and Paige for your cooking. I love cooking. I'm, been cooking. Everyone's been cooking during the pandemic, and I've been taking photographs, and I have a crazy character cooking with comedy. So I'm hoping to use some of our culinary experimentation to create more for our collective fun. So, a bit sprawling, but I am choosing Angela. Gigi. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Thank you. Is it Devo or Devo? How do you say it?
Devo. Devora is
Devora.
actually, okay. Yeah, Devora. And Devo is the nickname. Some little kid couldn't pronounce it, so thanks.
So I guess my affinity for plants starts very young, and I think that as I've gotten older, I appreciate more and more how much sort of emotional and I guess spiritual nourishment that they gave me as a young person. I grew up in a very beautiful place, fortunately, but there was a kind of sense of belonging that I had as a kid, and nature sort of gave me sort of comfort from a feeling of loneliness as a child. So I think that's where it starts for me. And I grew up in a pretty ecologically focused family and extended community. And certainly in school, you know, we were expected to have some understanding of environment and knowing where we lived. So I guess that sort of intimacy with place carried over to my life here in Los Angeles. And after living here many, many years, I realized I didn't really understand the ecology of LA. And so sought to rectify that and learn as much as I could about natural and cultural history, which extended to, you know, first people of this land. And so I guess that's partly what brings me here. And I also am very interested in, the more that I learn about ecological principles, how mind-blowingly correlative they are to human systems and how we deal with each other socially and emotionally. And I don't know, I guess that's sort of it. And so I, you know, am part of a couple different environmentally focused orgs here in Beechwood and elsewhere. And that's basically it. Thank you. Oh, I have to choose somebody. How about Mesa? Hi, Mesa. I haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, Angela and everyone. My name is Mesa, and I'm so glad to be here. I'm think have always also, you know, had such reverence for any moments with nature. All the earliest memories are in outside, and so lucky to grow up in the middle of LA with a big backyard. And I'm lead the band of singers, the community choir hosted by the Birdhouse, and I'm just really excited to be learning more about learning and you know, develop deeper connections and hear and dive into the stories. So glad to be here. And I'll call on Laura Hall. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Mesa. Lovely to see everyone. I'm very interested in plants. It's my life, my profession. But even those of you who I know here probably don't know that I got into plants because I was interested in plant medicine in my early college years. And that kind of started me down the path of learning about plants and ethnobotany. And I love learning about those like cultural uses of plants, whether it's spiritual, food, medicine. I took a class at Theodore Payne several years ago on indigenous uses of native California plants. But what really sold me on this class was the crafting word in the title, because I also am just a tinkerer, an artist. I've never met a craft project I didn't like. I'm a great dilettante at painting and embroidery and sewing and printmaking. And I think there's just something very innate and uniquely human that we love to work with our hands. So it is a universal thing to make things and to craft. And I have to point out, Devo, that I think it's so funny that you're here because your sister Wendy met her boyfriend John at my wedding 6 years ago. So I was like, wait, what's Wendy's sister doing here? That's so funny. So welcome to the small LA world. LA, or Hollywood, the tiniest town in the biggest city.
I talked to Georgia today. She bought a car. So
Yeah.
amazing, Laura.
Oh, and I'm going to pass it on to someone. Let's see who hasn't gone yet.
The whole trifecta up at the top, or top of my screen.
Well, we see it in different ways, but
Yeah.
I'll call on Tamara.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Good to see you too. So my name is Tamara, and I am living here in Beechwood Canyon, right near the Birdhouse, and which is as it turns out, it's a really magical piece of land that has a lot of big mojo, which we didn't we didn't know specifically when we bought this piece of land 30 years ago, but we were drawn to it, and we have not been able to leave ever since. We raised all our kids here, and we're not going anywhere. I have, always been a appreciator of nature, shall I say. Grew up with a mother who grew up on the farm in Iowa, so she was very much all about the natural rhythms of life, and she instilled that in me. Never really felt like I had enough time to, quote, really learn what I wanted to learn about plants, and always felt like that was my dream to someday have time to delve into that. I was in the arts, which didn't leave much time for being in the garden. So that's what I'm interested in doing right now, and I'm really happy to have an opportunity to learn about this specific land that we're on now, in terms of who was here first. And I came from Massachusetts, and we learned, as students, about that area. We have also a deep connection with Montana, and we learn about that land. And but this land of California has been so foreign to me as an Easterner, and so I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to learn about something really intimate like this place and the history of this place. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And I will pass it on to Jack.
Hello, I'm Jack Pullman, the son of Tamara and the brother of Mesa. So I grew up in the same backyard that Mesa did. Amongst all of the trees in this bowl, you can very easily forget that you're in the middle of megapolitan, cityscape. When I was young, I guess you could say I was an eco-fascist Luddite at like 5 years old. I was hoping for some sort of catastrophe that was going to send us back to living in the trees. I've toned down quite a bit since then, and discovered, the nuance of other people and whatnot. But I also don't believe that we deserve to charge off to Mars and leave this place in ashes behind us. And we have so much to learn from everyone who's come before us. It's like a mess we can't invent ourselves out of. There's been people living here, for longer than I can conceive of in my understanding of numbers and time, that have managed to not destroy the world. And there's a lot we can learn from. I too am an artist. I use a lot of found and natural materials, trash and stuff. And so that is also an aspect that is really intriguing to me. We'll pass it on to Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire, and I live over in Elysian Valley near the LA River, and my happy place is in my garden. I have in the front yard and the backyard. I just really like to dig in dirt. There's always dirt under my fingernails. And I happened on this class thanks to Tamara, and I'm a school librarian, and because of all the COVID stuff, I'm now helping in a 3rd grade classroom, and they're learning all about the Chumash. And so I've been learning along with them. And so it just seemed like, well, I have to take this class. I need to know more. That's why I'm here. I'll throw it over to John. Alan.
Oh man, there's so much heart and intelligence in this group. I really, I'm honored. And Lazaro, blessings, welcome. Thank you. This is amazing. This is happening. I love Lazaro. So, you know, you're gonna love him too. I'm looking forward to making instruments from flutes from the elderberry that we have that Lazaro has promised to teach us how to make flutes from. I'm one of the co-founders of the Birdhouse, and I think I know most of you, and welcome, Frank. I know about you a little bit from Cameron and some of the others. James, welcome. Any rate, and Christine. My mother said that I was born with dirty hands, so I was always in the dirt and soil and building forts and swimming in the sea. And so biophilia is my middle name. I don't know. I think we all carry the DNA of the original source. And so plant connection, yes. And I'm looking toward plants for leadership and the intelligence that they have. You know, what, 4 billion? Somebody will correct me on how long plants have been collecting their intelligence. And I think that's what I'm here to learn. But maybe more from Lazaro is, you know, I was born here about a mile away, which means Tongva land. I didn't know that until 3-4 years ago when I became aware of how important it is to understand where we are, who was here originally, how they lived, what the landscape looked like, where the waters were flowing, etc. So all of that, I think, will come somehow through the conversations that we're going to be having with the crafts that are going on. So at any rate, thank you so much. And I pass it back to Cameron, I believe, right?
Lazaro, if you'd like to say anything at
Yes.
this point, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So I'm real happy to be here. My name is Lazaro Visu Jr. and I'm Gabrielino Tongva. I'm very blessed today to be participating and leading this discussion, this discourse and this class that we're initiating here. And I'm so happy that we did the whole introductions. It's very important for us to know each other and to relate and to interact and to know each other's strengths, I should say, you know, our interests and what it is we do and why we're here. So I want to share a couple things with you about myself, basically having to do with the plants as well, because I feel like that's, as Cameron said earlier, what really connects us all. And lots of things happen in life, and we have our days, right? Everyone has a day, and I won't say any more. But for me, plants are a form of medicine beyond getting the materials and, you know, extracting them and processing them in a mortar. There's more to it. The interaction is medicinal. The process of that you go through in your mind of looking at a plant and discerning things, and, you know, the time you take to do it, for me, all that stuff is very medicinal. And I live close to the Rio Hondo, which is midpoint between the San Gabriel River. It's closer to the San Gabriel and the LA River. Basically, it's the small river that's between the San Gabriel and the LA River. And in our language, we call it Chinui Pahait. So the word in our language for river is Pahait. And Chinui means little. So sometimes we call the kids Chinui until they're big, then we don't call them Chinui no more. But basically, they would call it the little river. That's what they would call it. And it's an interesting thing because it took me probably about a year of living here until I realized that I live right between the two rivers. I live in the place between the two rivers, and unfortunately, they're big portions of them are concreted up. And the Rio Hondo is a basin, actually, that where the water collects when it rains hard because I live in a flood zone. And before the things were built here, this would have been an area where there, seasonal plants would grow according to the rains of the San Gabriel Mountains that year, and every year is different, right? So I've been able to learn some of that stuff by going over to the spreading grounds where that water collects and seeing for myself what it might have looked like, say about 250 years ago, or even before that. So for me, that's my medicine, and that's why I'm here as well. And it's a pleasure for me. It's an honor and a joy for me to work with the folks at the Birdhouse, and all of you too. You're my new relatives, and I recognize you, and I look forward to doing all kinds of stuff. Learning. I'm a student too of life and of plants and everything. And I won't say anymore. I'm thankful. And at this time, I think we should begin our presentation. Put together a little PowerPoint that we can go through and look at some of the content regarding plants that are native to the LA Basin. And we call the Los Angeles Basin Tovangar. And Tovangar means something like the place on the rock. In our language, that's kind of the reference that it has. It can have probably like 2 or 3 meanings or references, but that's the gist of it. The place that's on the rock. And what it is not necessarily, strictly speaking, of the Los Angeles Basin being in Los Angeles County proper. Because when we look at the landscape, counties don't matter, right? The mountains, the rivers, the ocean don't respect man's or woman's concept of counties and states and districts and stuff like that. The land is itself. It's going to do what it's going to do, right? It has its own intelligence, like John said, right? And so Tovangar is not strictly Los Angeles County. It includes parts of Orange County, and it extends into the San Gabriel Mountains and parts of up there by Topanga Canyon, Santa Monica, that area, and probably to the east over to the Chino Hills, and I would say Rancho Cucamonga, that way, out that way. And in the south and east, I would say it extends over to I'm trying to think of what the town is, the Santa Ana and east of Santa Ana, over there, the San Jacinto Mountains and that sort of thing. So it's not strictly within just LA County, and what Tovangar is more precisely is our cultural homeland. And we share what we recognize as buffer zones and our relatives. So our relatives are to the south, the Akashimen, who are a sister or brother nation. And there are relatives. And then to the east, there's the Cahuillas and the Serrano. And to the north are the Tataviam and the Chumash. So those are all the cultural groups, the ethnicities, if you will, and our relatives that are our neighbors, and who we recognize as also being indigenous people of this area of the region of Southern California in general. So that's what I'm going to try to cover, just some of the plants that you would see here that are not transplants. So that means they weren't brought from Asia or from South America or from Europe or anything like that. So without any further comments, let's get started. Oh, one last thing. I do have one last comment. The picture you're looking at here is from the Rio Hondo. Those are the plants, and that's one of the most vigorous sage plants I've seen recently, right there at the Rio Hondo. Okay, let's get started. So this is a diagram that a friend of mine named Craig Torres, he's my friend and mentor, put together. And what it's going to show us is this concept of relational reciprocity. This on the left, it'll show you all the different communities, all the different relatives. And so I might venture to mention that this class, the discourse, even this PowerPoint presentation is open to your comments and to your questions, and I want everybody to have a voice to participate, basically. So if you have something, please chime in. So either way, on the left, the circle shows us the different communities where people, us humans, right, we're on the outside. At the very core, the strongest beings are the rocks. Even though sometimes we don't think of rocks as some people, maybe not us, but maybe we don't think of them as being related to us, but they are, right? They're one of the essential beings and oldest and strongest beings of the land. And then as the circle goes outwards, you start seeing the other relatives and the other communities and how they interact with the plants. And so I wanted to ask this question in order to try to get some participation. What do you see in the left part of the diagram, the circle, the one with the animals and the people and the rocks? What do you notice? What stands out to you?
I see a spiral. This is Frank.
Okay. And what about the spiral?
Well, a lot of people talk about spirals, but I actually like labyrinths, and the labyrinth is it's not a maze. It's a journey. And so a spiral, in my way of thinking, and probably many other people, but it's a type of labyrinth, and it has a whole tradition behind it. Many,
sure.
Celtic, but also indigenous. And so, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I would say that you could think of that as being the kind of a nexus between indigenous people everywhere, because it shows up everywhere.
Yeah, it's also an analogy, a visual analogy for our interconnectedness and how the rocks are connected to the land and the plants are connected to the land and the rocks and so on and so on. I think it's a very, very interesting figure that Mr. Torres put on there that makes quite a bit of sense. I'm looking at the root systems, how they're almost blending into the rocks, and you can't really see where one ends or one begins. It's kind of small, but still, it makes sense to look at it that way. Is there anything else anybody noticed?
I noticed that you have stone people, animal people, plant people. So it takes away the hierarchical, like, oh, humans are at the top and everything else is beneath us. So I really like that.
Yeah, the thing that he teaches and that I try to I try to disseminate is that same concept, is that when we don't recognize those relatives, then it's easy to commodify them. It's easy to trash them and throw them away or set them aside or ignore them and destroy them. So these are attitudes we carry, cultural concepts and attitudes that maybe are not so healthy. So this is our way of mitigating that. All right, so on the right of the diagram, you see what he drew on there that's coming out from the interactions of all these relatives. And the reason that people are on the outside is because people in our culture are the most vulnerable of all the beings. We're the ones that need the most things, right? We need all these things to survive, right? We could survive with less, but the way we're carrying on in our culture today, it seems like that's not the case, right? It seems like we always need more and we need more and we need more. And we're also kind of in our culture, we set ourselves aside from the rest of the relatives. So that's what I'm drawing from this imagery, right? That people, we have separated ourselves from these relatives, even though we're reliant, and they're reliant on us too. But we're very codependent in that sense, that we need paper, we need to build houses, and we need clothing, and we need a lot of things, right? That for example, some of the relatives, the animal relatives, don't need so many things, right? They don't need all those things. So is there any other comments before I move on from this page? Any other things we notice?
I just wanted to say that I love everything that everyone said, and the idea of the labyrinth and the circular form, which is, you know, in all cultures, and, you know, the nautilus shell, and just as a motif, but it also looks like the iris of an eye that's closing and opening, responding to light, and then shutting down. So there's almost like a sense of a vortex, that's a sense of movement in this two-dimensional representation that has a three-dimensional relationship to the viewer. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it really draws you in, and makes you go, And I think actually I'm gonna bring this up next time too, and we'll take another look at it. It deserves, more time, which we might not get to today, but like I said, I might tie it into the other ones, because it definitely has to do with the other content we'll be experiencing in the next few weeks. Okay, so let's move on to the next image here. We have deer grass, and in our language we call grass like this, we call it shamat, and it's a material that you would see, very abundant if we hadn't built so many roads and houses and things like that here on the land. And it's a material, the long stalks, especially the center ones that grow the longest, they're used for basketry and to make a lot of other utensils that you might need in our culture to process food, like like I said, like baskets, like seed beaters and strainers. You need a lot of these type of fibers and materials from grasses like this to create your clothing, your not so much your house, but more like daily utensils you would use to survive, basically to live. And this plant, like I said, it's abundant, it clumps. And so today, what I see over at the Rio Hondo is that the landscapers, every once in a while, they go through and they weed whack it. And I just kind of like gasp when they do that, because it's kind of like they're trying to maintain it, but they don't know how. So they just weed whack it. And I think that's an interesting conversation for us to have if we ever get there, if we had more time. But does anybody here recognize this plant?
Yes.
Most of us? Okay. Yeah, I think we're gonna put some there at the birdhouse sometime this year. That's our hope.
Yes.
In our growing our garden there. Yeah, okay, so let's move on to the next image. We have the common rush, which we call juncus, right? And I brought a piece of it that I collected yesterday, and I'm gonna try to make sure that I'm showing it in the image. Can you see it pretty clearly? I'm trying to see if I can. Okay, yeah, and it's pretty flexible, especially when it's green, and you can work it green, and what you have to do is kind of smash it, and it becomes pretty malleable. And this is one of the main materials that's necessary for making baskets, basket hats, and baskets for collecting acorns and seed beaters and other things like that. They would use juncus, so it's a really, really important plant in our culture. And these two plants are the type you would see in the riparian zone, and very reliant on that steady moisture, to send out their roots, right? Their roots to conduce to grow. So that's one of the really important plants to us is the common rush. Okay, the next one. And this is just a basket that I took a picture of that was at the archery. And the Octree has an extensive collection of native baskets, not just Gabrielino baskets, but from other tribes as well. And those are some of the baskets that before were at the Southwest Museum. And so my community's been getting involved with uh, getting to know their collection, basically. Oh, wow, I see a basket there. Okay. Yeah. So basketry, just so you know, is like a really important thing in California Indian culture, but in our culture, especially it was considered one of the highest forms of art, visual art, functioning visual art, basically. And they're considered high value objects, items, and even relatives because they were kind of like documents. So, so when somebody got married or somebody made some kind of relationship, you give a basket to somebody, it was a big thing. It was a very, very big thing. And those things, the baskets would be passed around, from one family member to another to be cared for, basically. Um, and the knowledge too of how to make the baskets had to be transferred from one generation to the next in order to keep that type of cultural signature going, right? And with everything that happened in Los Angeles, our culture was highly impacted, is highly impacted because they built a metropolis here. And we cite that because if you make a comparison to say other groups that are more isolated or not so immersed in a metropoli, then you would see some of their cultural characteristics better maintained. So we're in the process of reclaiming some of that element of our culture. So okay, let's move on to another image. We have the Tule. Does anybody know of the Tule? Have you seen them before?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is a really important plant, especially again in the coastal estuaries, the riparian zones. You would see the tule growing in large amounts, and it could be used to make things like mats. So our bed, basically our bed, would be made out of tule, and it's a pretty interesting material because when you cut it, and I'm hoping that everybody could see this. Can you guys see this? I'm trying to show you the face of what it looks like. Let me see if I could do it right. Okay, I'm gonna get it close.
It's got those long brown, what do you call them, catkins or something,
Trying to show it to you in a
that
way
with
that
the fur comes out of them, and
that's right. Yeah,
very easy to identify.
yeah. What I'm trying to show you here is that they're sponge-like. When you cut them open, looks a lot like a sponge. And so what we do is use it for things like a pillow or a bed. It's a pretty cool material, and you smash it and it kind of comes back. See, I smashed it. Oops, I smashed it, and then it kind of goes back to its shape. So it's an interesting material, and this is what we also use to build our house, the outside, because it soaks up water a bit, just a little bit, just like any sponge, because it's sponge-like. And then once it's soaked up enough water, it stops soaking it up and it repels. So when you put one, let me see if I could do it again. When you put one over the other, basically that's the idea behind building your house, is that the raindrop falls on this one, it's saturated already, so it repels it, falls on the other one, that one's saturated too, so it falls off that all the way down to the floor. Right? And that's the element of building your house with willow framework, right? And then the tule walls, tule flaps. So that's kind of where we would sit inside there when it was raining and stay dry, that sort of thing. So it's pretty cool. I got this one from the Madrona Marsh. It was nice when I got it. It was nice and fresh, so I was able to twine it into this cordage right here, which I'm trying to show you without doing it backwards. And this is the beginning of it. That's what it looks like.
Wow, gorgeous.
Yeah, it's fun once you start doing it, but that's what it looks like. And I harvested it a bunch so I can make a mat, and try that out sometime. It's more comfortable than sitting on the concrete, I'll tell you that. But that's interesting to see the tule. And there's very few places around here in coastal Los Angeles that we would see it in abundance, because of the fact that, you know, basically we've built over everything, and all the coastal estuaries have been, you know, changed. You know, they fill them in, they build over them, that sort of thing. So but Madrona is one of the last ones that's there still. And the other thing we build with the tule are boats. So we would build tule boats by getting a lot of bunches together and tying them together, and basically shaping it like maybe kind of like a canoe. That's the word I'll use. And it was only for I should say quiet waters. So it wasn't like something you would take out into the ocean. It was more for like rivers, or for like a pond or an estuary, somewhere where, you know, you weren't gonna get carried away. And it's kind of hard. I got into a race last year, or no, before the pandemic started. We had a race over there in Long Beach, and it's kind of difficult because you have to kneel on it and you paddle at the same time, right? So it takes certain muscles that maybe we don't use every day. However, it is quite fun and interesting to do. And hopefully I could build one there at the Madrona one day. Yeah,
Hey, I got a question.
Yeah.
So in South America, in the Andes, they build those rush boats. I can't remember, reed boats. Like, and I guess it's like the Kon-Tiki that one guy did. So there is a tradition like that from other places. I'm just curious, is it similar looking, the boat you're talking about?
It's almost exactly the same thing that they use over in Lake Titicaca.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. But the Bon-Tiki raft was more like a what's it called? I think they call it an outrigger canoe or something like that. That was a little bit that was more, yeah, that was more for like open ocean, you know. It's supposed to balance each. Yeah, but this one is strict. The one I'm talking about is strictly tule. So it's just twined like cordage, like yucca or dogbane, and tule. There's no wooden planks. The idea is that the same thing is that it's very light, so you can actually carry it. Maybe, you know, probably by yourself. Maybe if it's light enough. If it's not waterlogged, you can carry it. So when you put it in the water, it gets saturated and it can't take on any more water, so it floats. That's the idea. So
yeah, wow.
So like I said, yeah, it would mostly be used for, like, if you're looking at this picture for a situation like that, where there weren't like these big waves and you might be fishing or collecting, you know, shellfish or something like that. That's kind of the idea behind those tule boats. All right, let's move on to the next image. We have the California sage brush. Does anybody recognize this one?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, beautiful plant, very, very medicinal. We use it in the bathing tradition, right? Whether it's the sweat house or otherwise, it's a one of those sages that you would use for that, and it has other purposes as well. And there's just a number of sages, I should say, here in California. These are just a couple that we're going to cover here. Okay, does anybody want to say anything about this plant? Anything you've experienced?
Oh, mute?
Yeah.
Oh, does your culture do this, any of the smudging, or use it in burning it?
No, not, I should say not in abundance. Our culture is mostly white sage. That's what we use for things like you know, smudging, or for antibiotics. That's kind of what we use. But this sage is more like for, I should say we don't burn it. That's what I mean to say. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And this is the famous Salvia apiana, which is the white sage, the one that we saw in the first picture, initiating this PowerPoint. And you'll see the leaves there that are like silver green, And this plant, this relative is just a survivor, I gotta say. Like it can tolerate some pretty harsh stuff as far as like the weather and the ground, the soil, you know, and it still can flourish. You'll be surprised like the way, you know, and the rate at which it will grow in a season. It'll just take off and grow those long stems with, yeah, and start seeding and flowering, and the bees will be all over it in no time. And it's a beautiful thing, I gotta say, when it goes into that stage of its cycle of its life. It's a beautiful thing. And so usually we'll wait until it goes through that whole process of growing, you know, going to seed, and then maybe we'll harvest some of the sage, you know, after the sage leaves, I should say, after that, you know. So it's quite an interesting plant there. Okay. Is there anybody that wanted to say something about this one? Any?
It kind of reminds me of lupin in that it's purple and it has those long swooping up flower stalks.
Mhm.
But it's so different in the leaves, of course. But anyway, just a way for me to help remember how it flowers.
Yeah, it has a beautiful smell too. It's very pungent. It has just a great smell. And I've done some talks, and we've done some work regarding the commercialization of the white sage, because it is so pungent. It is well known, and it has become heavily commodified by people who you know, practice things like shamanism, or you know, that type of thing. And they even you know, hack down the whole plant to get the sage that they need to wrap, to send it to places like I think, like they said, Switzerland, and they were sending it to a lot of places around the world. And there's an article that I had the people at the birdhouse, the folks there, read. I believe it was last year, and it talked quite a bit about that. It's from a magazine called News from Native California, and it's quite a big topic for us, because you know, it's something that's close to us, and it could be heavily commercialized. It is, and I've even seen people on Netflix enact, I should say, small rituals of them using it. So it's becoming, you know, something that's part of pop culture, and you know, that's something that maybe deserves some conversation in the future.
Lazaro,
Yeah,
can I ask a question?
sure, of course.
So I was up in Ballard, and I thought I saw some white sage on the old Pony Express trail, and I
Mhm.
picked it, but I don't remember it being so pungent. And I wondered if there was something that masquerades as sage,
There is.
because my sister almost immediately became allergic, eyes cried, and I really, having had contact with a lot of different kinds of sage all over, mostly Southern California, I was surprised. I thought maybe this really isn't sage, because it was,
I
because
think
the
one of
actual stalk
the
was more
Encelias
tubular.
looks like
You know, the stalk was more sage has a little more sticky stalk. This felt more like tubular, like it was hollow inside. So I just wasn't sure what that was. If it was in fact sage, or
There, yeah. It's hard to know because I can't see it, but
oh,
I'll
of
tell
course
you this, that
I do
there's
have it in a car.
oh, you do?
Yeah.
What you can know, because you'll rub the leaves, and you'll smell that distinctive pungent smell. But
Right.
there are a few lookalikes, I should say. One of them is called, I think it's called Conejo Sagebrush or something like that. But just know there are lookalikes. So
Yeah.
and they're all part of. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's an Encelia, like some of the coast sunflowers that have a very gray leaf. And, you know, even as someone who like knows plants pretty well, sometimes I've mistaken that Encelia for white sage before I smell it. So I feel like that one's really common in Southern California on trails. So I feel like that's most likely, if it doesn't smell, because white sage is so strong.
No,
I
this
can't
was
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, this was more pungent than I even remember white sage. Like almost immediately, we were almost like fallen over. I thought this is, so it could have been white sage. It just could have been, particularly, I don't know, it was growing along. At any rate, Lazaro, I will take a picture and text you at some point just to,
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
show
send it
show
to
it
me
to.
and we can identify it, amongst the group and sort of the
Thank
plant
you.
folks, a part of this group. I think we should,
Yeah.
keep moving along here.
That's what it's about, us talking about these things. It's great. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. We have the meal fat, and this is really important too. This one you would see along the riparian zones. It needs seasonal watering. So the interesting thing is it grows these stalks that tend.
Uh-oh.
Make sure I show you the image good, but this is a piece that it just grows really straight, and so it's really useful to make different things out of it. But it's the reason they call it mule fat, I understand, is because when the Spanish came through here, um, they would feed their burros, right? That's what they would eat. They would let them hang out there and eat it, and so it got that nickname mule fat because they would eat it to the point where they were full, right? And that's what I heard. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Okay, let's keep going here. We have the famous elderberry, the beautiful one. All right. So this is a very important plant to us because we have a close relationship with it in our culture, and of course, it grows. It can grow to be very old and very very productive in its flowers and branches and that sort of thing. So we would use almost every part of it: the wood, the flower, the berry, all that stuff. So it's quite an important plant to us. I hope that in the future we can do some work there at the birdhouse. I know there's two elders now. So hopefully in the future we can do some work there with this plant and get to know them better, because that's what this is about. It's about kind of, you know, uh, taking a closer look at these plants and learning to identify them in their different stages throughout the year, and their, that sort of thing, how they're used, and that's the essence of relationships. Is we're relatives, but we got to get to know each other better. So this is beautiful. Okay, let's keep moving on here. We have the sycamore. Okay, very beautiful plant. Oh wow, it's a protected species. Oh wow, I didn't know that. Thank you, Angela. So the sycamores, very important plant, very fast growing one. It's one of the grandparents, I should say, of the different habitats, because it grows to the height that it protects a lot of the other relatives around it. And I see it a lot here on the Rio Hondo. Very, very beautiful, very productive plant. And hopefully, we could see a lot more of those older trees in the future, in years to come. And I think we should just keep moving along here. We have the Valley Oak. There's a whole group of oaks native to the Los Angeles area and the Vanguard and LA Basin. And this is just one, the Valley Oak. And just one quick detail is that we would use the acorns. It's like one of the staples of the Gabrielino diet is the acorn. So, and we had some at one point there, some acorn mush that we made, right? That was some good stuff, I gotta say. Okay, let's keep going. I won't make nobody hungry here, because if I go down that road, I'll just talk about food. Guttings black willow. Okay, this is one of the willows that we would see in the coastal areas, the riparian zone again. This is one of the ones that's the primary type of willow at the Madrona Marsh. And probably the one that we would use to build our house with, our key. And it would have the branches when they're young, they're quite flexible. So it's good to make a lot of things, different things like granary baskets and the framework for your house, different things like that. So it's quite a beautiful and interesting plant to take a closer look. All right, next we have the laurel sumac. And this is one of the plants that would probably, play a role in the habitat, being one of the plants that kind of fills in that area between the smaller plants and the taller ones like the sycamores. So I like to kind of look at plants in that light, where what role are they playing in the relationship, and what place do they have in that habitat, in that environment. Okay, let's keep going. Let's move along here. All right, we have a big thank you from me. I just want to thank you guys for taking this time to listen to me. I mean, I know it's quite a bit of listening, and I just wanted to share that stuff with you. Those are just a couple of the plants, I should say, that are native to the LA Basin, and we might cover more if time allows. But I think we might just move along here into some of the other content and subjects that we were going to cover in our session. And I want to open it up right now to discussion, to your comments and your thoughts. So please.
This is Frank. Hey, so in my life, so I was a forester at one time, long time ago, and I was in the Midwest. So I pretty much knew all the tree species there, you know, at least native species. And there's an elderberry there that's slightly different, but also very similar. I mean, it was obvious. And up here in Oregon now, there's actually two different kinds of elderberry that maybe you've never seen because apparently it's extremely rare and only grows right up here in the Northwest. I don't know about that, but that's what I've been told. It has red berries. And normally they, you know, if you look in a book, it'll say not edible, but I think it's just not palatable. Anyway, having said all of that, I have a real special relationship with elderberry. I've had it for probably 40 years. There was a time in my life when I wrote poetry every day for 5 years straight. And it was something I had to do.
Wow.
And it was like weird thing, you know, going on where pretty much everything I heard, at least to me, sounded like poetry. I'm not claiming that it was great. But well, one day it stopped. It's like this thing stopped. And it was real troubling for me. And I was reading a book about I can't remember the exact title, but it was about 7 different plants that were like special plant helpers, and it concentrated on them. And I was just noticing what the author was talking about. So I thought to myself, maybe I can communicate like that. And I was sitting in a riverside in Corvallis, right here where I live, and all of a sudden I saw something, and I identified this appearance as being a native person. They looked native to me, but they just kind of went by me, like wham. And I had this experience where I just looked up, and I just happened to be sitting underneath an elderberry tree that I hadn't really noticed. And it was kind of winter time. And around here, winter is kind of odd. It's not a hard winter. And the elderberry berries often don't really fall off. They just dry up and they turn into little raisins. And literally, they're like little tiny raisins. And this person or whatever vision spoke to me and said, basically, oh, you know, use those things like medicinally. I don't think you used that word. Stick it under your tongue. So I did. And I took like 3 of these little tiny berries, and they're totally parched and dry. So I just stick them in there, and it's like the saliva starts to wet them. And suddenly there was a burst of like tart taste. And all of a sudden, which it happened real naturally, I didn't realize it, but I started writing. And about 15 minutes later, all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, it's all started again. And ever since then, I've used elderberry whenever I'm in like a writer's block or creative block. That's what elderberry does for me. Just sharing.
That's interesting. You know, one of the ways we use it is exactly like that, is we desiccate them, dry them out, and bag them, and then, you know, you could save them for quite a bit of time. Yep. And then just you know, boil some water and throw them in there, and you know, that's your tea.
Excellent.
And it's quite medicinal, you know, the elements that are in there, you know. help with things like fever and that sort of thing. In our tradition, that's what they do. So that's quite interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, elderberries like that area, where they get that steady moisture, not too much, but enough that they can keep, they can be healthy and that sort of thing.
One more thing, you just made me remember. So there was some people here when the first white people showed up, and the white people called them the Pinafu, and that you'll see that name if you look in real, old literature. And right off the top of my head, I don't remember the actual, the real name right now. I'll definitely look it up. But anyway, it turns out Pinafu meant elderberry. When the white people asked the native people, who are you? They thought they meant, well, what is this place where we are? So this town, Corvallis, was called the Cha Pinafu, which means the place where elderberry grows. And so the white people thought, oh, they're calling themselves the Pinafu.
Wow.
I'm just sharing all of that because that's the indigenous name from the people around here for elderberry is Pinafu.
Okay.
Interesting.
Lazaro, just a very quick comment. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when our left brain gets clogged, our right brain gets clogged, sometimes a shock to the system like the elderberry will help the corpus callosum be able to refocus. So my guess is that you were just, completely fossilized. I can't write. So you were in the logic side. I can't write. Bam, the elderberry happened. And you just went, and you're able to access the fire from that other side of your brain. So I do think plants are there as messengers, and there's actually, a anatomical component to the messaging, which is kind of fun to bring that into the conversation. Those of you that might be aware of, it has an arsenic component, which is a startling serotonin, problem as well. So I just think it's interesting. I would love to talk about how parts of the plant may be poisonous and parts may be nourishing, and how that storytelling evolved as well, how the knowledge of that happened, if it ever comes up.
Wow, that's
Yeah, these are interesting things, to talk about, especially how that knowledge came about. It took people a long time, and the transmission of that culture, that knowledge over time too. That's part of our legacy as humans. Or human people, I should say, that we were able to, and we should be mindful not to let it go too, to keep it, to use those medicines, and keep the knowledge of how to use them carefully intact. I want to be mindful of our time, and I think we have about 10 minutes left. And I want to take this time. If there are any more remarks, I would be happy to hear them. And if not, I wanted to offer some instructions for our upcoming project. I believe that almost all of us have our kits, and there was a clapstick in there. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about the clapstick. And it's because it's related to the plants of the LA Basin. And in our culture, we make them out of elderberry, but we also make them sometimes out of bamboo or out of wood planks, like maybe some oak, or it just depends. There's kind of different versions. And I want to let you know too that we're not the only tribe or culture in California that uses clapstick. And an analogy would be that the way other Native Americans, say for example on the Great Plains, use drums, that's the way California Indians use clapsticks. So most tribes in California didn't have drums, and we're one of those tribes that never used drums. So it's kind of an interesting thing when to talk about that my ancestors didn't know what a buffalo was or what a drum was, like they didn't really have any, because that wasn't a part of their culture, until the Wrigleys brought the buffaloes to Catalina Island, right? But the elderberry, which I'm going to show you a picture of a clapstick made out of elderberry. This is one that I made, and I get my woods from trees that people cut. I don't like to go cut the wood too much. Takes a couple months for it to dry. And then what I do is I hollow it out. So there's something called a pith inside. It's like a soft inner fiber or material, and that has to be bored out with the stick, carefully, kind of just, with time, patiently, I should say. And then the middle is split. And the old way we would do it is by getting a stick or a rock. And basically the stick is like that. When you get it, you hollow it out, and then you get the rock, you initiate the wedge, and then you kind of just hit it on the sides. So what we would do is, say for example, this was the wedge, I would be hitting it with the stick until it started to split like that, right? And then once it was split, you kind of start convincing it, because the wood is one of those materials that it can shift. It's malleable, especially a soft wood like elderberry. It's like considered a soft wood, whereas something like oak is a hardwood, right? Elderberry is a softwood, so you can do certain things with it. And so what we would do is split it, and our name for the clap stick in our language means split wood. So that tells you right there that's how they did it. And then this one, what I do is I burn them a little bit, and that makes it, kind of gives it a different timbre, different sound, more of a precise sound instead of I should say a more of an opaque sound, so it's pretty interesting. And what we do is we hit it on our hand like this, and then when I hit it, it's not just the sound of it hitting my hand, it's the two claps, the two sides of the stick hitting each other, right? So that's kind of the idea. And seems like a very simple thing, and it is, but there's a technique to it too, because your hand has different parts to it, and all of us have different hands, right? So right here you have the meaty part of your hand, right? And here you have another meaty part of your hand, and here you kind of have a bony part, right? So there's different sounds. There's different ways to play it. But they're real subtle differences, once you start playing it more, you'll start to hear, yourself. You'll hear yourself, like the different sounds you're making. And it becomes kind of like speech, where you can't say the same word over and over. You have to use different words and different sounds, right, to make a sentence, for example. So that's kind of how our music works, is that nuance and different nuance. However, I want to give you, after that, that information, some instruction on what to do with your clapstick. So you got a bamboo clapstick, and what you're going to do is, the first thing you're going to do is you need to find is the Chumash clapstick. I use it in my garden. Yeah. The Chumash are one of the tribes that have clapsticks as well. That is correct. And we're relatives. We're neighbors. So we would have interactions. Like we would share things, share culture, that sort of thing. The first thing you're going to do with your clapstick is you need to, the space that's in between the two slats, basically the opening part, you need to figure out a way to sand it down, whether it's with a rock or with a piece of sandpaper. That you might get a piece of sandpaper, and for example, if this was the sandpaper, you would fold it in half. Okay, I'm trying to show you. I'm left-handed, so I'm challenged having to do it this way. But basically you would stick it in there and kind of like rub it, because you want to get that burr off. I don't know if any of you have the clapstick in front of you, but if you do, you'll notice there's a burr. There's kind of like a little roughage in there, and you want to get that out. You want the slats to be clear. You want to be able to see them like that without any kind of stuff that's in there. You want to try to make it clear so that the sound can come out. So that's one of the
Lazaro?
things. Yes.
This is John.
Yes.
Mine came with no gap. I mean, it's cut, but it's been shrunken down so that it collapsed again. So I can either wedge something down at the bottom to keep it spread, or do what you're saying, which would be to either carve or sand.
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sand. So we just want to make sure that the burr is out of there, but it's also so that you don't get splinters when you're playing it. That's what I'm, and then what we're gonna do is I recommend you get a skewer, something like the diameter of a skewer, you know, really small. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it in there. I'm putting a pencil just to show you what I mean.
Oh,
Yeah, but you
got
have
it.
the right, you have the right idea. You got to train it. Like I said, it's like wood and bamboo. You can train them, right? They're malleable, so you can kind of make them shift. And so this is one of the ways that you're gonna train it. And by a week, in a week or two, it'll be fully trained. It'll be pretty much, that's the way it'll be. And when you store it, you're gonna do that too, and it depends on the temperature too. Like if it's a cold day and you take it outside, it's gonna what's it called? It's gonna shrink, but that's the nature of the materials, it's the nature of wood and the nature of us getting to know relatives, right? How they work and that sort of thing. So then once you do that, once you've sanded it and you've got something around your house that you can, start training it to open up like that, you're gonna want to decorate it. So while you're sanding it, while you're figuring all that out, think about design. Think about a way you want to design it to personalize it for yourself. You can use markers. You can find a way to twine it with yarn or rope. I recommend that you find materials that you don't have to buy. I hope that you can find materials around your garden, around your house, something used, preferably, something that's already gone through a cycle that we're not going to be buying more things. That's kind of the idea. You can also burn it if you're really careful. You can kind of like this. I got a candle that was on and I just kind of put it above it and I turned it like that while the candle was burning. So that was kind of fun, You just got to be careful, right? Because it's fire. But I want you to kind of dream and think about how this clapper stick is going to be personally for you. Okay, so don't rush it. We might check in next week to see how it went and practice a little bit. Maybe I'll show you, we'll practice some rhythms maybe if we have time. But think about how to design it. That was the main thing. I wanted to give you the idea of how to design it so that it fits with your experience, with your personality, with you. And it becomes basically like you, a part of you, and a document that serves to help us remember this experience, these learning experiences, right? For me, that's a lot of what these are, more than just crafts, they're documents. We have a word. I was trying to think about that, but I think we're running close to the end of our time together. And I just want to make sure I cover everything. So I kind of rely on Cam just a little bit to help keep me in line here as far as time and content goes. And so I think I covered everything for the clapstick. Just a quick check. Does anybody have any questions about the clapstick instructions at all?
I just have one question, Lazaro.
Sure.
If I glue like a shell or if I glue seeds on it, will that affect the sound or?
Probably not, but if you do that, it'll kind of become like, I don't know, just depends how it fits on your hand,
Mhm.
You can also drill a hole, at the end of it right here, and you could string the shells on there so that when you're playing it, they shake,
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Thanks.
That's another idea. Yeah.
This is one I did, which I just used tape from the, and things I had lying around. So.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, I want that one. Make me one, please.
Do that like just now?
Yes.
What is this have to do with the clapstick, or is this a different project?
That's a bull roar kit. That's a different thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a bull. There's 3 projects I put out there. There's the clapstick, the bull roar, and the soapstone carving pendant.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, so I'll be putting the instructions together for that. But for this weekend, maybe over the weekend, you can work on your clapstick, finish it up. Is there any other comments or questions about the clapstick, just to make sure we walk away knowing what to do?
Not about the clapstick, but about one of your plants. You didn't say how you use laurel sumac.
Well, that's one of those things. It's like we would use it for cooking. You can cook with it, right? But you can also, I believe it's an anti, what do you call it? Like an anti-pest. So
Oh.
so there's certain plants that we would use like in the granary baskets. There's certain plants you could put in there with the food to kind of keep
Oh.
the bugs that would bore into them, keep them away.
Oh,
You
okay.
you discourage them from doing that because they smell that pungent stuff and they don't want to be there. Naturally, they don't want to be a part of that. They want to eat stuff that's rotting, that's there, that it's exposed, That's
Okay.
that's their role in our environment, So yeah, is there anything else that that any other questions? Okay.
She,
Right.
there's,
Wait a second. What was that question?
Oh no, I just wanted to say, Lazaro, that I just wanted to thank you because I've taken herbal classes, and I think that we've all taken plant medicine, plant ID classes, and we've heard about the native plants of California or Los Angeles, but I've never ever heard them introduced as the relatives of somebody. And so the fact that you've kind of introduced yourself and introduced these plants as relatives, I just want to thank you for just changing the way that we learn and the way that we relate to our communities. But more importantly, I think I also want to thank you for this music or medicine. I've been really kind of obsessed with hands lately, and I've realized that every culture kind of does something with their hands, and I've been realizing that there's healing behind clapping. There's actual science behind the impacts of applause and clapping, and just noticing that some indigenous cultures really manifested that through drumming, while your culture manifested that with clapsticks. And I just feel like given that we're in Hollywood, I just think about what applause would do for the healing of this world, and to do that with plants and all these natural elements just has been a wonderful experience to kind of or realization to come to, and just thank you for offering that to me, and just the magic of the hands and the music that it brings to our lives. So just thank you.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. There's like a therapy and then a medicinal way, to of percussion, in general, and also just sharing like things like this, for me it's very helpful to have people around me that understand, and appreciate, and I appreciate you guys. So I think all of this is just about relatives, relativity and our community building as well. That's what it's about. So thank you for that, Jessica. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, so just a couple of housekeeping things at the end. Is Frank, James, and Devo, if you just let's be in contact via email with your address if you need me to ship it, or I can give you the address at the birdhouse and you can come pick up your kit for these things going forward. Donna, as I mentioned, your kit will be arriving, I think, tomorrow or Friday at the latest. There will be some other resources in preparation for the next class, not physical ones, but documents, things to read that I'll disseminate. So yeah, try to look at those beforehand. It should enrich your experience of the next class. And I would just leave you with an invitation to these plants that we looked at today. For those of you who are on Dovangar, right? That maybe you can go out and try to find them and have an experience with them. We're not just learning in this box of a screen, but this is sort of about changing the way that we're seeing and the way that we're interacting with our environment and making relationships, acknowledging relations and relatives amongst the kingdoms of life and all of creation that surrounds us. So that's just an encouragement to go and have yourself an experience, and to think about, sort of that prompt from that early slide was about reciprocal relationships, about reciprocity, and think about we talk about the uses of these things and how we can apply them in our lives. And I try to bring the question into my mind as well when working with plants of like, what is my responsibility to them? What does my work to them look like? they're trying to bring that sense of if they are our relatives, then we have obligations or responsibilities toward them, and we hold them as they hold us too. So that's all we've got for now. Lazaro, any closing words?
No, I just want to, thank everybody. I can't thank you enough. It's a great pleasure for me to do this. I'm always learning new things as I go along. And I'm also processing things in different ways that make me, open my eyes a little wider and rethink stuff. And I look forward to the future classes that we do, and the possibility that we all can gather at the birdhouse again. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, we hope everyone will be able to see our native garden here at the birdhouse, the Tongva Learning Garden that we're developing with Lazaro here. So that's an invitation to an unknown date, but maybe so.
Jumper, come.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for us tonight. But thanks, everybody. And if you have any questions during the week, don't hesitate. Just reach out to me, and I'll try to answer questions or communicate with Lazaro and get all the questions answered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Nice meeting
I'll see you
everybody.
next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Cam, I wanted to know if I could ask you a question.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that you're going to send out the article like tonight or tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do it
Perfect.
right after we hang up.
Thank you, Cam. I appreciate you. You have a good one, okay?
You too, buddy.
We'll be in touch. Bye.
Night, y'all.
Hey, so Cameron, I just emailed you my address.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
All right.
I'll do the same. I'm not sure when I'm coming, so I might as well email you. Thank you, Cam.
Okay.
Should I
Absolutely.
call you Cam, or you want to be Cameron?
Call me Cam.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye.